The golden rays of the setting sun bathed the dusty fields as Samuel, a struggling farmer, pulled his worn hat lower over his face to shield himself from the heat. He never imagined that this ordinary day would change his life forever. A distant cry shattered the silence, a scream for help coming from the nearby forest. Without hesitation, Samuel sprinted toward the sound. What he didn't know was that the person he was about to save wasn't just anyone. She was the daughter of one of the wealthiest billionaires in the country. What happened next left everyone stunned. Samuel, a man in his late 30s, had always lived a life of hard work and modest means. His days were spent toiling on his small plot of land in a quiet rural village. The farm, passed down from his father, was both his pride and his burden. It barely produced enough crops to sell at the local market, leaving Samuel to live hand-to-mouth most months. Despite the challenges, he was known in the village for his kindness, always willing to lend a hand to his neighbors, even when he had little himself. His humble home, a small, weather-beaten house with a creaky wooden door, was nestled amidst vast fields of corn and wheat. Inside, the furniture was sparse, yet everything was meticulously cared for, a testament to Samuel's diligent nature. The walls held faded photographs of his late parents, who had taught him the values of honesty, compassion, and perseverance. Life had never been easy for Samuel, but he carried on with a quiet resilience. He dreamed of someday expanding his farm and building a better life, though he knew those dreams might never materialize. His only solace was the quiet beauty of the countryside, the rustling of the leaves, the chirping of birds, and the vast open skies that stretched endlessly above him. On this fateful day, Samuel was tending to his crops when a sound broke through the serenity of his world. It was faint at first, a distant, panicked scream that sent a chill down his spine. He dropped his tools and strained his ears. The cry came again, clearer this time, from the direction of the dense forest bordering his fields. Samuel's heart raced. It wasn't uncommon for travelers to pass through the area, but something about this scream was different. It carried fear, desperation, and a plea for help. Samuel dashed toward the forest, his feet kicking up dirt as he ran. The undergrowth was thick, and the towering trees cast long shadows, making it hard to see. But he followed the sound of the cries, pushing through the branches and brambles without hesitation. Finally, he stumbled upon the source of the commotion. There, tangled in a mess of thorny bushes and trembling with fear, was a young woman in her early 20s. Her clothes, which looked expensive and out of place in the rugged wilderness, were torn, and her face was streaked with tears. She looked up at Samuel with wide, terrified eyes. "Please, help me," she gasped, her voice hoarse. "They're coming for me." Samuel didn't need an explanation to act. Whoever or whatever was chasing her didn't matter. All he knew was that she needed help, and he wasn't about to abandon her. "Don't worry," he said firmly, offering her his hand. "You're safe now." Little did Samuel know, this moment would set off a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. Rising action, Samuel helped the young woman to her feet, her legs shaky and covered in scratches from the bushes. She clung to his arm as he led her out of the dense forest, his sharp eyes scanning their surroundings for any sign of danger. The woman kept glancing over her shoulder, fear etched deeply into her face. It was clear she had been running from something or someone, but Samuel knew this wasn't the time to ask questions. First, he had to get her to safety. Back at his modest farmhouse, Samuel pulled out a chair for her in his small kitchen. "Sit down," he said gently, placing a glass of water in front of her. "You look like you've been through a lot. I'll get you some bandages for those cuts." The woman hesitated for a moment before finally sitting, her hands trembling as she took a sip of water. Samuel disappeared into the adjoining room, returning moments later with a small first aid kit. As he carefully tended to her wounds, she finally began to speak. "My name is Olivia," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was kidnapped." Samuel's hands froze for a brief moment before continuing to clean the cut on her arm. "Kidnapped? By who? Are they still out there?" She nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. "I managed to escape when they stopped their car near the forest. I don't know where I am, but I couldn't stop running." Samuel took a deep breath, his brow furrowed. He wasn't used to dealing with situations like this. His life was usually confined to the simple routines of farming, but looking at Olivia, he knew he couldn't turn her away. "You're safe here," he said firmly. "No one will hurt you as long as you're under my roof." For the next few hours, Olivia rested while Samuel kept a vigilant watch over the house. The rural area was isolated, and Samuel knew it was unlikely that her kidnappers would find her here, but he wasn't willing to take any chances. He checked the locks on the doors and windows, his mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the curtains, Olivia seemed calmer. She explained her situation in more detail. Her father, Marcus Grant, was a billionaire known for his vast business empire. She had been taken for ransom by a group of men demanding an astronomical sum of money. Despite her wealthy background, Olivia appeared humble and deeply shaken. Samuel listened intently, nodding as she spoke. "Do you have a way to contact your family?" he asked. Olivia shook her head. "I lost my phone when I ran, and even if I did, I'm scared they'd trace the call." Samuel thought for a moment before deciding to head into town to buy a prepaid phone. It wasn't much, but it would allow Olivia to contact her family without drawing attention. "Stay here," he told her. "Lock the doors and don't open them for anyone but me." However, Samuel's trip to town wasn't as uneventful as he had hoped. As he purchased the phone, he noticed two unfamiliar men standing near the store, their eyes darting around suspiciously. His instincts told him they might be connected to Olivia's kidnappers. He quickly completed his purchase and headed back to his truck, keeping a low profile. Back at the farmhouse, Samuel handed Olivia the phone. "Call your father," he said. "Tell him you're safe, but don't give away your location." Olivia hesitated, her hands trembling as she dialed the number. When Marcus Grant answered, his voice was filled with a mix of relief and anger. "Olivia, where are you? Are you hurt?" "I'm safe, Dad," she replied, her voice shaking. "I'm with someone who's helping me, but I can't tell you where I am. Not yet." Marcus's tone softened. "Just stay safe, sweetheart. We'll figure out how to get you home." A few days passed, and Samuel and Olivia began to form a bond. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, they shared a mutual respect and understanding. Olivia opened up about the pressures of growing up in her father's shadow, while Samuel shared his struggles of keeping his farm afloat. Their conversations brought a sense of normalcy to an otherwise tense situation. But the peace didn't last. One evening, as they sat in the kitchen discussing their next steps, the sound of tires crunching on gravel interrupted their conversation. Samuel peered out the window and saw two black SUVs pulling up to the house. His heart sank. "Get in the back room," he whispered to Olivia. "Don't come out until I say it's safe." Olivia obeyed, her eyes wide with fear. Samuel grabbed the old shotgun he kept by the door, more for show than anything else, and stepped outside. 4 men in suits emerged from the SUVs, their expressions cold and calculating. "Mr. Grant sent us to retrieve his daughter," one of them said, holding up a badge that identified him as private security. Samuel didn't lower the shotgun. Something about the men's demeanor didn't sit right with him. "If you're really here on her father's orders, why didn't he call me first?" he asked. The man's jaw tightened. "We don't have time for questions. Hand her over." Before Samuel could respond, Olivia stepped out from the house. "Dad didn't send them," she said, her voice trembling. "I recognize them. They were with the kidnappers." The men's eyes narrowed, and Samuel realized they weren't here to negotiate. Without warning, one of them lunged toward Olivia. Samuel fired a warning shot into the air, the loud bang echoing across the fields. The men hesitated, clearly unprepared for resistance. "Get off my property," Samuel growled. "Now!" The men retreated to their vehicles, but not before one of them issued a chilling threat. "You've made a big mistake, farmer. You won't be able to protect her forever." After the confrontation, Olivia broke down in tears, apologizing to Samuel for putting him in danger. But Samuel remained steadfast. "You didn't ask for this," he said, "and I won't let them hurt you." The encounter brought them closer, with Olivia realizing that Samuel's selflessness and courage were unlike anything she had ever experienced. She began to see him not just as a savior, but as someone who embodied the values she had always admired, but rarely encountered in her privileged world. Samuel, meanwhile, wrestled with feelings of inadequacy. He was just a poor farmer, yet he had been thrust into a situation far beyond his means. Still, his determination to protect Olivia only grew stronger. Later that night, Samuel used the prepaid phone to call Marcus Grant directly. He explained the situation, detailing the confrontation with the men and Olivia's belief that they were connected to her kidnappers. Marcus was silent for a moment before speaking. "I'll send trusted security to retrieve her," he said. "But it's clear I need to reevaluate who I trust in my circle." The conversation revealed something surprising about Marcus. Despite his wealth and power, he was deeply worried for his daughter and felt guilty for the danger she was in. Samuel could sense the sincerity in his voice, and it gave him hope that Olivia would be safe once reunited with her family. However, the road ahead was still uncertain. The kidnappers knew where Olivia was, and Samuel knew they wouldn't give up easily. With time running out, he and Olivia began to prepare for what they hoped would be their final stand against the men who had terrorized her. Climax. The night was eerily quiet. The soft chirping of crickets in the distance only amplified the tension that hung in the air. Samuel paced back and forth on the creaking floorboards of his modest farmhouse, his weathered hands gripping the shotgun tightly. Olivia sat at the kitchen table, her face pale and drawn, her eyes flickering to the windows every few seconds. They both knew it was only a matter of time before the kidnappers made their next move. Samuel had fortified the house as best as he could. The doors were barricaded with wooden planks, and heavy furniture was pressed against the windows. He had turned off all the lights, hoping the darkness would give them an advantage. But deep down, he knew that his defenses wouldn't hold for long against the kind of men they were up against. Olivia broke the silence. "Samuel, you don't have to do this. They're here because of me. I can turn myself in." Samuel stopped pacing and looked at her, his expression a mix of anger and disbelief. "Don't you ever say that again," he said firmly. "You're not going anywhere. Those men don't get to win, and they don't get to hurt you. Not while I'm here." Olivia nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. She had never felt so helpless, and yet she had never felt so protected. The first sign of trouble came just after midnight. The sound of gravel crunching outside was faint but unmistakable. Samuel moved to the window, careful to stay out of sight. Through the curtains, he could see the headlights of an approaching vehicle cutting through the darkness. "They're here," he whispered. Olivia froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Samuel motioned for her to hide in the back room, and she obeyed without hesitation, clutching the prepaid phone tightly in her hands. Samuel took his position by the door, the shotgun raised and ready. The vehicle stopped just outside the house, and moments later, the sound of boots on gravel echoed through the still night. Samuel's pulse quickened as he counted at least 4 men approaching. Their voices were low, but he could make out fragments of their conversation. "Make it quick. Get the girl and get out." They weren't here to negotiate. One of the men tested the front door, finding it locked. Another laughed softly. "Think some planks of wood are going to stop us?" Samuel braced himself as the door rattled under their force. When it became clear that they couldn't break it down quietly, one of them shouted, "We know you're in there! Open the door, old man, and we won't hurt you." Samuel didn't respond. Instead, he cocked the shotgun, the sound echoing loudly in the silence. "Leave now," he called out, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "You're trespassing on private property." The men outside laughed. "You think we're scared of you? You've got 10 seconds before we come in and take what we want." Samuel's grip on the shotgun tightened. He wasn't a violent man, but he knew he couldn't let them get to Olivia. He had made a promise to protect her, and he intended to keep it. Just as the men outside began to force the door, a new sound cut through the tension, the crunch of tires on gravel. Samuel's heart leapt with hope. Maybe Marcus Grant's trusted security team had finally arrived, but when Samuel peeked through the curtains, his hope turned to despair. It wasn't the security team, it was another group of men, this time in a sleek black car. As they stepped out, Samuel recognized one of them from the news. It was Marcus's own head of security, a man named Victor. Samuel's confusion deepened. Wasn't Victor supposed to be on their side? The two groups of men exchanged a few words, and then Victor turned toward the house. "Samuel," he called out, his voice calm and commanding. "We're here to help. Open the door." Samuel hesitated. Something about Victor's tone didn't sit right with him, but before he could respond, Olivia appeared at his side, her face pale. "It's Victor," she whispered. "My dad trusts him." Samuel looked at her, torn. He wanted to believe her, but his gut told him something was off. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. Reluctantly, Samuel unbarricaded the door and opened it a crack. "What do you want?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. At Victor. Victor smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm here to bring Olivia back to her father. You've done your part, farmer. Hand her over." Samuel's grip on the door tightened. "If you're here to help, why are you working with them?" He gestured toward the other group of men who stood behind Victor, their expressions cold and menacing. Victor's smile faded. "You don't understand how the world works, Samuel. Sometimes you have to make deals with the devil to get things done." Olivia stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Victor, what are you talking about? My dad trusts you." Victor turned to her, his expression softening. "Your father has no idea what's going on, Olivia. He's too blinded by his own guilt to see the bigger picture. This isn't about you, it's about leverage." Samuel's blood boiled. "Get off my property," he growled. "Now!" Victor sighed, pulling out a gun. "I was hoping you'd cooperate, but I see you're going to make this difficult." What happened next felt like a blur. The men behind Victor began to move toward the house, their weapons drawn. Samuel fired a warning shot into the air, but it did little to deter them. They were trained professionals, and they knew how to handle resistance. Suddenly, Olivia shouted, "Wait!" She stepped in front of Samuel, her hands raised. "I'll go with you, just don't hurt him." "No, Olivia!" Samuel shouted, grabbing her arm, but she shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "This isn't your fight, Samuel. You've done enough. I won't let them hurt you because of me." Victor smirked, clearly pleased. Smart girl. But before Olivia could take another step, the sound of more vehicles approaching filled the air. This time, it was Marcus Grant's actual security team, led by a man named Harris. The SUVs screeched to a halt, and armed men poured out, their weapons trained on Victor and his team. "Drop your weapons," Harris commanded. "You're surrounded." Victor hesitated, clearly weighing his options. But when he saw the sheer number of men against him, he reluctantly lowered his gun. His men followed suit, dropping their weapons to the ground. Harris approached Samuel and Olivia, his expression grim. "Are you two all right?" Samuel nodded, though his hands were still shaking. "We're fine." But they were about to take her. Harris turned to Victor, his eyes narrowing. "You're done, Victor. Marcus trusted you, and this is how you repay him. You'll be lucky if you see the outside of a prison cell again." Victor didn't respond, his face a mask of anger and defeat. As Harris's team secured the kidnappers, Marcus Grant himself arrived on the scene. He rushed to Olivia, pulling her into a tight embrace. "Thank God you're safe," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Olivia clung to him, her tears soaking his shirt. "Dad, Victor, he betrayed us." Marcus's jaw tightened as he looked at Victor, who was being led away in handcuffs. "I trusted you," he said, his voice cold, "and you betrayed my family." Victor smirked, but he said nothing. Marcus turned to Samuel, his expression softening. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You saved my daughter's life." Samuel shrugged, his face humble. "I just did what anyone would have done." But Marcus shook his head. "No, Samuel, most people wouldn't have. You went above and beyond, and I'll never forget it." As dawn broke over the farmhouse, the chaos of the night began to fade. Harris's team stayed behind to ensure the property was secure, and Marcus made arrangements to relocate Samuel and Olivia temporarily until the threat was fully eliminated. But as Samuel looked out over his fields, the golden sunlight glinting off the dewy grass, he couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. They had faced danger head-on and come out stronger for it. Resolution. The morning sun bathed the small farmhouse in golden light, casting away the darkness that had engulfed it the previous night. Samuel stood on his porch, the weight of the past hours etched into his weathered face. His farm, a quiet sanctuary, had become the epicenter of a life-altering event. Despite the turmoil, the sunrise brought with it a sense of calm, a reminder that life moves forward, no matter how chaotic it may seem. Inside, Olivia sat at the kitchen table, a cup of tea cradled in her hands. The events of the night still lingered in her mind, but the presence of her father, Marcus Grant, sitting across from her, brought her comfort. For years, Olivia had felt like a secondary priority in Marcus's life, overshadowed by his billion-dollar empire. But now, as he reached across the table to hold her hand, she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen in a long time, genuine love and regret. "Olivia," Marcus began, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "I can't tell you how sorry I am. I should have protected you better. I trusted the wrong people, and it nearly cost me everything." Olivia squeezed his hand, her expression a mixture of relief and sadness. "Dad, I'm just glad we're safe now. But we can't ignore what happened. Victor's betrayal wasn't just about me. It's about everything your company stands for." Marcus nodded solemnly. "You're right. I've spent so much time building my business that I forgot what truly matters. Family, integrity, and the people we impact along the way." Samuel, who had been quietly listening from the doorway, stepped forward. "Marcus, words are important, but actions speak louder. If you truly want to make things right, start by holding yourself accountable and ensuring this doesn't happen again." Marcus looked at Samuel with a newfound respect. "You're absolutely right, and that's exactly what I intend to do." In the weeks that followed, Marcus took significant steps to make amends. He personally oversaw the investigation into Victor's betrayal, ensuring that everyone involved was held accountable. But more importantly, he began to use his wealth and influence to create meaningful change. One of his first acts was to offer Samuel a partnership. Recognizing Samuel's integrity and resilience, Marcus proposed a joint venture to transform the farm into a sustainable agricultural project. "Samuel," Marcus said during a meeting at the farmhouse, "your farm has potential far beyond what it is now. Together, we can turn it into something that benefits not just you, but the entire community." Samuel hesitated. "I've always been a simple farmer, Marcus. I'm not sure I'm cut out for big projects." Marcus smiled. "You don't have to change who you are. Your values and hard work are what make this farm special. I'll provide the resources, but you'll lead the way." Reluctantly, Samuel agreed, and the partnership blossomed into something extraordinary. The farm became a hub for sustainable farming practices, employing local workers and providing fresh produce to underserved communities. It wasn't just about profit, it was about purpose. For Olivia, the ordeal had been a wake-up call. She realized that she wanted to step out of her father's shadow and create her own legacy. Inspired by Samuel's resilience and her father's newfound humility, she launched a foundation focused on supporting rural communities and fostering leadership in young women. One of her first initiatives was to fund scholarships for girls from farming families, ensuring they had access to education and opportunities. During a press conference to announce the foundation, Olivia spoke with passion. "This isn't just about giving back, it's about building a future where no one feels forgotten or powerless. People like Samuel remind us that strength and dignity can be found in the most unexpected places." Her words resonated deeply, and the foundation quickly gained traction, attracting support from celebrities and philanthropists alike. Olivia had found her purpose, and for the first time, she felt like she was living a life true to herself. The transformation of Samuel's farm and Olivia's foundation had a ripple effect on the local community. The once struggling town began to thrive as new jobs and opportunities emerged. Families who had considered leaving now saw a future for themselves in the area. One of the most significant changes came in the form of a new community center funded by Marcus Grant, but named after Samuel. The Samuel Carter Center for Resilience and Growth became a beacon of hope, offering resources like vocational training, mental health support, and agricultural education. At the grand opening of the center, Samuel was asked to speak. Standing before a crowd of friends, neighbors, and dignitaries, he felt a lump in his throat. "I never set out to be a hero," he began, his voice steady but emotional. "I'm just a farmer. But this community has always been my family, and family means standing by each other, no matter what. I'm proud to see what we've built together, and I know this is just the beginning." The crowd erupted into applause, and for a moment, Samuel felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. His life, once defined by quiet struggles, had become a testament to the power of kindness and perseverance. For Marcus, the journey wasn't just about external changes, it was deeply personal. He had always prided himself on being a self-made billionaire, but Samuel's humility had shown him a different kind of strength. "Success isn't about how much you accumulate," Marcus reflected during an interview. "It's about how much you contribute to the lives of others." He began to restructure his company, implementing policies that prioritized ethical practices and employee well-being. He also became a vocal advocate for rural development, using his platform to highlight the importance of supporting farmers and small communities. The story of Samuel and Olivia became a symbol of hope and redemption, inspiring people far beyond their small town. News outlets covered the story extensively, framing it as a reminder that wealth and power should be used for good. For those who followed the story, the takeaway was clear. True wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the impact you have on others. Samuel's act of kindness, born out of his unshakable moral compass, had set off a chain reaction that changed countless lives. But for Samuel, it was never about recognition. Sitting on his porch one evening, watching the sun set over his thriving fields, he felt at peace. He thought of the journey that had brought him here, the challenges, the risks, and the unexpected friendships. And he knew it had all been worth it. "I never wanted anything more than to take care of my farm," he said to Olivia, who had joined him on the porch. "But life has a way of surprising you. Sometimes it takes a storm to show you just how strong your roots are." Olivia smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "And sometimes it takes someone like you to remind us what really matters." A thought-provoking ending. As the story of Samuel and Olivia's journey came to a close, it left an indelible mark on those who heard it. It wasn't just a tale of hardship and triumph, it was a testament to the power of integrity, community, and second chances. The final words of the story echoed the sentiment that had driven everything. In a world where wealth and power often overshadow compassion, it's people like Samuel who remind us that true greatness lies in what we give, not what we take. And in the end, it's not about the riches we leave behind, it's about the lives we touch along the way. The screen fades to black, leaving viewers with a profound sense of hope and a renewed belief in the goodness of humanity.